But speaking of podcasts, still no confirmation as to what happened, but there's a lot of speculation of what happened to Melyssa Ford on the Joe Budden show.
What really happened to Melyssa Ford on the Joe Budden podcast? She suddenly vanished after episode 849. No explanations, no appearances, nothing. Did she quit, get fired, or is there something much deeper going on? Stick around, because the truth behind her disappearance might shock you. The last time fans saw Melyssa Ford on the Joe Budden podcast was back on August 6, 2025. That episode, number 849, titled Super P and featuring Offset, has since become a marker of sorts. Why? Because it was the final time Melyssa's voice was heard on the platform. Since then, she's been noticeably absent, and people can't help but ask the question, where has Melyssa Ford gone? At first, it didn't raise many eyebrows. Hosts miss episodes from time to time. Life happens, schedules clash, and sometimes people just need a break. But as weeks turned into months, and still no sign of Melyssa, curiosity grew louder. Listeners began piecing things together. Noticing her drop had been removed from the podcast intro, and that Joe Budden himself made no effort to address her absence directly. In the world of podcasting where chemistry and familiarity matter, her silence was impossible to ignore. To understand why her disappearance feels so significant, you have to look at her role on the show. Melyssa wasn't just filling a seat. She brought a distinct energy. Known first for her modeling career and media appearances, she carried cultural weight with her. She balanced Joe's sharp and often confrontational style with a calmer, more grounded perspective. For many, she was the bridge between heated debates and thoughtful dialogue. So when that voice went missing, the dynamic shifted noticeably. Naturally, fans took to social media. On Twitter, or X as it's now called, people started posting clips and asking questions. Where's Melyssa? Why hasn't she been back? Did something happen behind the scenes? With no official word from Melyssa or the podcast team, theories spread quickly. Some believed she had been fired. Others assumed it was a personal decision. A few guessed it might be health. The truth, however, remained unknown, and that silence only fueled speculation. But here's the bigger picture. Melyssa Ford isn't just a random podcast guest. She's been a recognizable figure in entertainment for decades. From her early days in music videos to her transition into media commentary, she's carved out a space where her name carries history. That's why her absence doesn't feel small, it feels like the end of an era, or at least a turning point. The absence also raises questions about the nature of podcasting itself. Unlike television or film, podcasts thrive on personality. Audiences aren't just tuning in for information, they're tuning in for the people. They want voices they connect with, perspectives that resonate, and personalities that feel familiar. Remove one of those voices, and the balance shifts. For some, Melyssa's absence made the show feel different, less layered, less balanced. Of course, speculation is one thing, reality is another. There's always the possibility Melyssa simply needed time for herself. She's survived a serious car accident in the past, taken breaks to focus on healing, and openly talked about prioritizing her well-being. Maybe this is another one of those moments. On the other hand, it could also be about creative direction. Shows evolve, personalities clash. Not every collaboration is meant to last forever. Still, Melyssa's story taps into a larger conversation. What happens when relevance begins to fade? In the past, simply being Melyssa Ford carried weight. Her name meant access, influence, attention. Today, the entertainment landscape is more crowded than ever, and staying relevant requires constant reinvention. Leaving a major platform like the Joe Budden podcast may close certain doors while opening others, but it undeniably marks a shift, and that's where fans are left waiting, speculating, and wondering what comes next. Will Melyssa return to the podcast? Will she launch something of her own that finally clicks? Or will she step back from the spotlight altogether? No one knows for sure, but the fact that her absence continues to spark debate proves one thing. She left an imprint. Melyssa Ford's last appearance on August 6, 2025, may not be her final chapter, but for now, it stands as the moment her voice faded from one of the biggest podcasts in culture. Whether it's a pause, a transition, or the end of an era remains to be seen. What's certain is this Melyssa Ford's journey isn't just about one woman leaving a podcast. It's about the fragile balance of influence, the pressures of staying relevant, and the mark of a personality who, love her or criticize her, still has people talking long after the mic has gone silent.
To work in a group setting and be considerate of those that she's working with. Now, whether you think that somebody should be considerate of others that they're working with or not is besides the point. When you're working with a team, and the team becomes more important than the individual. And I don't think that she understands the magnitude of her individualizing herself in that way, and how it impacts the podcast as a whole.
I honestly don't think Melyssa Ford was fired. Every so often, you'll see conversations pop up on Twitter or hear people questioning where she's gone, like in one clip from August 30th, where her absence became a hot topic. Observers noted that her signature drop was even removed from the podcast's intro, sparking speculation that she may have quietly stepped away. If that's the case, then all respect to her. It's understandable that anyone can only tolerate so much before deciding to walk away. On the flip side, not everyone sees her departure as a loss. Some argue the show feels stronger without her presence. Others recall moments where it seemed Joe Budinand at times. Queen's Flip singled her out unfairly. Still, critics also point out that perhaps Melyssa Ford wasn't the most fitting choice for the podcast from the start.
Said that he had to part ways with her because of business. It's because of work. He gave her ample amount of time off. He gave her as much. He did not put a limit on how much time off she could have. However, after I think a year, she still wasn't coming back like she should have been, and so he had to move forward. In her not coming back, before he moved forward, it was like she would be like, oh, I need time off, I'm still not together, I still can't do this and the third. But she was out at club events, she was making outings, making appearances, etc. So she was still working, she was still collecting checks, but she wasn't working at the podcast as she contractually was supposed to be.
Now here's where things get interesting. At one point, a woman publicly suggested that Melyssa Ford doesn't work well with others and that she rarely prioritizes anyone but herself. On the surface, it's a bold and eye-catching claim. Statements like that travel quickly in entertainment circles, where personalities are constantly scrutinized and reputations are often built or broken in perception rather than fact. But when you take a closer look, the remark starts to feel less like a grounded observation and more like a sweeping generalization. The problem with blanket statements is that they often leave out the nuance. Melyssa Ford's career spans decades across multiple industries: modeling, television, radio, podcasting, and in each space, she's collaborated with countless professionals. If she truly couldn't work with others, how would she have managed to sustain herself in such competitive, team-oriented environments? Entertainment, at its core, is built on relationships. Very few careers last as long as Melyssa's if someone is truly incapable of cooperating or contributing to group dynamics. That's not to say Melyssa hasn't had conflicts. Anyone in the spotlight, as long as she has, is bound to face public disagreements, critiques, or messy moments. She's been on air with strong personalities like Joe Budin, who himself is no stranger to controversy. In that kind of environment, tension is inevitable, but disagreement does not automatically equal dysfunction. Sometimes friction is part of what makes a show compelling. It's possible that what some interpreted as not working well with others was really just Melyssa holding her ground or expressing perspectives that didn't align with the majority in the room. Another angle to consider is how gender plays into these criticisms. Women in media, especially those who've built reputations around beauty or status, are often held to different standards than men. A man who asserts himself on a podcast might be labeled confident or passionate, while a woman who does the same might be painted as difficult or self-centered. Could it be that Melyssa faced a harsher critique simply because of who she is and how audiences perceive her? That possibility shouldn't be ignored. The accusation also lacked concrete evidence. The woman who made the claim didn't provide examples, didn't cite specific incidents, and didn't reference any tangible proof. Instead, the criticism hung in the air as more of an opinion than a documented truth. And that's the tricky thing about speculation: it can be repeated so many times that it starts to feel like fact, even when no one has verified it. In a digital age where rumors move faster than press releases, reputations can be shaped less by reality and more by perception. It's worth remembering that Melyssa herself has spoken in the past about her challenges and growth. After her near-fatal car accident in 2018, she shared openly about how it forced her to reassess priorities, relationships, and her approach to life. That kind of self-awareness doesn't typically align with someone who never considers others. In fact, it suggests the opposite, that she's reflective, thoughtful, and trying to evolve. So is Melyssa Ford truly someone who can't work well with others? The evidence suggests it's far from that simple. She's been part of teams, collaborated across industries, and stayed relevant long enough to prove she can hold her own in spaces that require teamwork. What's more likely is that her strong personality and willingness to voice her perspective have, at times, rubbed certain people the wrong way. And in an industry that thrives on gossip, those moments can be exaggerated into narratives that overshadow the truth. At the end of the day, the claim that Melyssa Ford doesn't prioritize others may sound dramatic, but without real proof, it remains just that, a claim. What it really highlights is the way public figures are often boxed into narratives that may not fully capture who they are. For Melyssa, it seems less like a case of being unable to work with others and more like an example of how quickly speculation can snowball into an unfair reputation.
Wow, ladies, it doesn't matter if you're still attractive. You're played out to all boss who know what's up with you. Everybody who's in the know what's up with you. So they will roll in the hay, but nobody's going to commit. So they have to get their money by suing because, no baby's going to come out of her at that carburetor womb having that.
Here's where the story takes another turn. Melyssa Ford wasn't new to podcasting. She actually appeared on The Jason Lee Show as far back as 2016, staying involved there for quite some time. But on June 28, 2018, her life took a drastic shift. While driving in Los Angeles, her Jeep was clipped by an 18-wheeler that swerved into her lane. The impact sent her car spinning out of control before flipping 3 times. The crash left Melyssa with severe injuries, including a fractured skull. Afterward, she understandably told fans and colleagues that she needed time away from podcasting to focus on healing. Yet, once she recovered, she never did return to that platform, choosing instead to spend her time elsewhere. Fast forward to 2024, and the Joe Budden podcast introduced a new co-host, Mark Lamont Hill, known as a professor, journalist, and television personality. Hill brought academic weight to the table, but his addition also stirred up curiosity. Because of his history with Melyssa Ford, both of them have acknowledged that they once dated, and Mark himself has openly said they remain friends to this day. While some shrug this off, others speculate that their past may have created tension behind the scenes, especially considering Mark's marriage and Joe Budden's constant on-air teasing about their former relationship. For Melyssa, that running joke may not have been just lighthearted banter. Some viewers believe those reminders made her feel uncomfortable, adding to the strain of being in such a public-facing role. On top of that, Melyssa's past conflicts, such as the very public dust-up with Cameron, had already shaped perceptions of her among certain fans. To some, she came across as combative. To others, she was simply standing her ground. Either way, her presence on the podcast has always sparked divided opinions. So, that brings us to Corey Holcomb's take on Melyssa Ford's absence. He didn't just acknowledge that she's no longer part of the Joe Budden podcast, he went further, suggesting that her career itself has stalled out. In his view, Melyssa has lost the ability to resonate with the men she once appealed to. At 48, he argued, dating younger men often comes with its own compromises, and he implied that this decline extends beyond her personal life and into her professional opportunities. It's worth looking at the numbers he points to. Melyssa launched her own show, Hot and Bothered, but the traction has been underwhelming. Some episodes barely crack 1,000 views, with titles like Do You Really Need Closure? Hovering at just a few hundred. Yes, she had a spike when Maya appeared as a guest, but outside of that, the audience interest has been minimal. And that's surprising, given her industry connections. She's brought on names like Da Vinci, Jess, and of course, Maya guests that many up-and-coming podcasters could only dream of landing. Still, the response hasn't translated into consistent viewership. That raises an important question. If Melyssa truly had strong drawing power, wouldn't fans from the Joe Budden podcast have followed her to her own platform? The fact that they didn't suggests her influence may not be as strong as it once was. And for Corey, that's the larger point. Melyssa Ford may have the freedom and network to shape her career however she wants. But at this stage, the audience simply doesn't seem interested. Here's another criticism worth unpacking. Beyond her appearance or age, some argue that Melyssa Ford's real issue on the podcast was her lack of substance. Listeners often felt that her points wandered, lacked depth, or simply didn't connect with the discussion. In podcasting, whether you're male or female, that's a big problem. People tune in because they want perspectives that are sharp, thought-provoking, or at least entertaining, and when the commentary feels out of place or doesn't add value, audiences lose patience quickly. This perception followed Melyssa even after leaving the Joe Budden podcast. Many felt that if she struggled to deliver engaging takes while on such a high-profile platform, there was little reason to expect stronger content from her solo project. That skepticism carried over when she launched her own show, where the numbers reinforced the doubt. More recently, fans grew concerned after Melyssa posted an Instagram story from what appeared to be a hospital bed. The post sparked speculation, with Joe Budden himself addressing it on episode 861. Sending her well wishes but admitting he had no idea what was really happening. Even Mark Lamont Hill, when asked about it, brushed off the question with a vague Melyssa who response, which came off dismissive given their history. Now, to be fair, Mark Lamont Hill has his own strengths and weaknesses in the podcasting space. While some say he isn't always engaging as a solo act, his background, a PhD, experience at CNN, and a wide range of expertise spanning hip-hop to geopolitics gives him versatility that makes him valuable in group discussions. Compared to that, Melyssa Ford doesn't bring the same breadth of knowledge or ability to pivot across different topics. And in a crowded podcasting landscape, that difference in range and adaptability can be the deciding factor in who stays relevant at one point. Simply being Melyssa Ford carried weight. Her name alone drew attention, opportunities, and admiration. But today, that shine doesn't hold the same influence it once did. She's at a stage in her career where she feels difficult reality for someone who's built a reputation on beauty, presence, and longevity in the industry. Leaving the Joe Budden podcast may have been Melyssa Ford's personal decision, or it may have been the result of circumstances outside her control. Either way, her exit highlights a reality that even the most recognizable media personalities eventually face. The window of opportunity in entertainment is not infinite. Every platform has its own rhythm, and every cast member brings a certain energy. When that energy fades, gets replaced, or no longer connects with the audience, it creates a shift that can't easily be undone. For Melyssa, it appears that her space on the podcast was beginning to narrow, regardless of how the decision played out behind the scenes. For longtime fans, watching this unfold feels bittersweet. Melyssa has been part of the cultural conversation for decades, and her presence on the podcast reminded people of her resilience, someone who had survived major personal and professional challenges and still managed to remain visible. Seeing her fade from that stage feels like witnessing the closing of a chapter that many hoped would last longer. For critics, however, the story plays differently. There's a camp of listeners who, over the years, grew tired of her perspectives, feeling that her contributions often derailed conversations or added little substance. For them, her decline in visibility is not seen as a tragedy but as a natural outcome, almost a consequence of overstaying her welcome in an industry that rewards sharpness, adaptability, and fresh insight above all else. This contrast in how Melyssa Ford's absence is perceived underscores the broader challenge faced by anyone in entertainment, staying relevant in a culture that never stops moving. The pace of podcasts, social media, and digital content is relentless. Listeners demand fresh takes, quick wit, and constant reinvention. What worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. And while some personalities evolve seamlessly with these changes, others struggle to keep up, leaving their legacy tied more to their past accomplishments than their current relevance. At the end of the day, Melyssa Ford's journey is a reminder of how unforgiving the spotlight can be. She still has the option to reinvent herself, to reframe her narrative, rebrand her presence, and create something that resonates with today's audiences. Or, she may quietly step away, letting her earlier contributions stand as the highlight of her career. Either path is possible, and only time will reveal which direction she chooses. But what's undeniable is that in entertainment, the spotlight doesn't wait for anyone. You either adapt to its shifting demands or risk being left behind.